right, go right ahead,
Thank
Mr.
you, Your
Jackson.
Honor. Trooper Proctor, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to turn to tab 2 in the binder in front of you. Can you take a look at the face page of what's under tab 2 and tell me if you recognize that?
Yes, sir. It's a private.
Remember that it's easy through Triple H
Thank you.
for identification.
Thank you. All right, go right ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Your
Jackson.
Trooper Proctor, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to turn to tab 2 in the binder in front of you. Can you take a look at the face page of what's under tab 2 and tell me if you recognize that?
Yes, sir. It's a private text thread with high school friends.
And this includes 9 chat participants that you engaged with?
That's correct.
Those participants include people by the name of Bird, Whitey, and Doc, correct?
Correct.
And then there's some other folks in there that are identified by at least the last 4 digits of their phone number, correct?
Yes.
So this is a group text or a group chat with you and 8 of your high school friends about this investigation, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you never thought when you were engaged with these other 8 individuals that this particular set of chats would ever become public, did you?
No, I did not.
I want to take a look at page 2527, if you could turn, that's on the bottom right of the document in tab 2. Do you recognize, I'm sorry, do you have that page in front of you?
Yes, sir.
You recognize that this group chat was taking place on January 29th at about 10:52 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And the person that I'll identify as 5051, that's the last 4 digits of that phone number, indicates Chip, name of that BPD cop, correct?
Correct.
First of all, you indicated on Monday that you're Chip, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You responded at 10:53 p.m., John O'Keefe, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So you were willing to tell, just a few hours into an investigation of the death of a Boston police officer, you were willing to tell a bunch of high school buddies details about the investigation, including the name of the victim, correct?
At this point, it's 16 hours later, sir. Not a few.
16 is a few hours, correct? I'm not talking about days later.
It was about 16 hours later, sir.
Correct. And you identified John O'Keefe as the Boston police officer who is fallen in the yard at 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
You also informed, if you will skip to page 2529, you also informed these same folks, these same high school buddies, that, quote, all the powers that be want answers ASAP, correct?
Yes.
You knew, Trooper Proctor, that there was brass that wanted this case wrapped up quickly and efficient. Isn't that right?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you were thinking?
No, the people wanted answers, sir.
They didn't just want answers. They wanted answers ASAP. What does ASAP mean?
That's as soon as possible.
Right. And you were texting this to your high school friends, again, 16 hours into this investigation, right?
Correct.
And you knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
In this text exchange, let's turn to 2532, actually. You have that in front of you?
I do.
In this text exchange at 10:56 p.m., your buddy Bird writes, I'm sure the owners of the house will receive some shit, correct?
Correct.
How did you take that to mean? Did you take that to mean that he could get in trouble?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what my friend was getting at.
Well, you had some idea.
Yeah, maybe.
The owners of the house isn't going to get any shit for this, right?
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, you interpreted it like he's not going to get in any trouble. He's not going to be a suspect, correct?
Correct.
And he's not going to be implicated in any way. Is that right?
Correct.
And your answer was one word, correct?
Yes.
What was that word?
Nope.
And then you followed that up with an explanation as to why you said no, didn't you?
That wasn't the explanation why I said nope. I simply said homeowner's a Boston cop too, meaning Mr. O'Keefe was a Boston cop. The homeowner was a Boston cop as well.
The question that preceded your answer, nope, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, was the homeowner's going to get some shit for this, correct?
That's not what I meant with that text.
That's what you wrote.
Not what I meant, sir.
All right, let's take it in order. Question. Oh goodness, the homeowner's going to get some shit for this. Answer, nope. Next text, he's a Boston cop too. That doesn't sound like an explanation for your nope.
No, that's just saying he's a Boston cop as well, Mr. O'Keefe.
And that's why he's not going to get any shit, correct, Trooper Proctor?
Well, he's not going to receive any shit, sir, because Mr. Albert, the homeowner, had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death.
And you knew this 16 hours into your investigation.
Yes.
Less than a day.
Yes.
To your satisfaction.
To my satisfaction and to the members of my unit.
So let him finish. We didn't get that. Finish your answer.
To my satisfaction and to all the members of my unit who investigated that day.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
So I'm going to let it stand. Trooper Proctor, you have to keep your voice up, okay? Jurors need to hear you way back there.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact of the matter is, you hadn't been to the crime scene by the time you wrote this text, correct?
Correct.
You hadn't been inside the home, correct?
No.
You had you had questioned a grand total of 3 recipient witnesses at this point, correct?
Yes.
And 2 of the 3 were named McCabe, right?
Correct.
And 1 of the 3 was named Albert, correct?
Yes.
And it's against that backdrop that you wrote, nope, the homeowner's not going to get any shit because he's a cop, right?
That's not what I meant by that.
At 10:57, Bird goes on to write, he, the homeowner, must have been a puddle to accomplish that. And then he writes, who's the homeowner? And then he writes, I hope not, but I can see it. Correct?
Yes.
A puddle means drunk, correct?
That's a term for it, yes.
In other words, Bird wrote that the homeowner must have been so drunk, so wasted, to have killed him. Correct?
Objection.
Do you know what that means? Do you know what that text means?
Just the puddle part, Your Honor. That term.
All right, so he can answer that.
And the puddle part means drunk or wasted, right?
Yes.
And what Bird actually wrote was, he must have been a puddle to accomplish that. Correct?
That's what he wrote.
And then you write back, quote, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital, right?
Correct.
You used the phrase waffled about a Boston police officer who had fallen in the snow and died in someone's yard. And you decided to use the word waffled him, correct?
Objection.
So sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Did you answer, she waffled him, I looked at his body at the hospital?
I did answer that, yes.
And then Bird questioned, she waffled him, correct?
Yes.
And then you responded, he was banged up. Is that right?
Yes.
Then a person with the phone number 0095 wrote, I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up? You see that?
I do.
And you wrote, nope. Is that right?
Correct.
Yet again, this is before 11 o'clock at night on January 29th, 2022, some 16 hours into your investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
So before you ever went to the crime scene, before you ever went into the house, only having interviewed 3 folks, you had this case nice and wrapped up, didn't you?
Yes. Based on the evidence my office uncovered that day, the one shoe discovered at the scene, the one shoe at the hospital, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, the broken taillight pieces underneath the snow.
Super Proctor, I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked, did you, in your mind, have this case wrapped up? Was it cut and dry in your mind?
Yes.
Bird then writes, so the owner of the house was a woman. Sorry, was a woman cop that beat him, question mark, right?
Yes.
And then you wrote, that's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you said, then I saw the guy, correct?
Correct.
So what you meant by that, Trooper Proctor, was according to you, based on your conversations, your initial conversations with the paramedics, the first responders, you were under the impression that this was a beating death. He'd been beaten to death, correct?
The way it was given to me, sir, was
That's yes
for
or
medical.
No. That's yes
No,
or no?
he's going to answer the question. If you want
Go
to
ahead.
withdraw the question, you can.
No, go ahead.
We entered this investigation with an open mind. It was given to me as a medical situation. And when we saw Mr. O'Keefe's body at the hospital, Sergeant Buchanan and I, we saw his injuries and we were kind of working through how these injuries occurred.
As a matter of fact, both you and Sergeant Buchanan believed that he had suffered the injuries as a result of a physical altercation based on information you received from the paramedics initially, correct?
Initially, we didn't know what we had. We knew there was some significant injuries to Mr. O'Keefe. And we're still figuring out how those injuries occurred.
Well, you just testified. Initially, we didn't know what we had.
Right.
But 16 hours after the fact, you wrote the following sentence. That's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics, correct?
Correct.
So initially, you did think you knew what you had. A physical altercation leading to a death, correct?
Correct.
So when you just said, initially we didn't know what we had, that wasn't quite true. You did at least have an idea of what you thought you had, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
All right. You were aware, initially, that John O'Keefe had suffered a 2-inch laceration to the back of his head, correct?
Yes.
That resulted in a skull fracture, correct?
Correct.
He had a laceration over his right eye, small laceration just under the eyebrow, correct?
Yes.
Had a laceration on his nose, is that right?
Correct.
He had patterned scratches on his right arm, abrasions, scratches, correct?
Yes.
And he had no injuries below the neck.
Not that I observed, sir.
Not a single broken bone, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single fracture, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single bruise below the neck, right?
Not that I observed.
Looks a lot like a physical altercation, doesn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Bird writes, Bear, let's focus, correct?
Yes.
Who's Bear?
That's another nickname I have.
0095 writes, what does she waffled him mean? And then Bird writes, what's the story, correct?
Correct.
And you wrote, she hit him with her car. Is that right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen, in your experience, have you ever seen a pedestrian who was hit by a 6,000-pound car with no bruises? Ever?
The pedestrian strikes I've seen have been at high speeds,
And
60
that's
plus.
a person out of his shoe, right?
60 plus miles per hour. So I can't recall off right now, top of my head, as far as injuries in the past pedestrian strikes I've attended.
Okay. So someone, you indicated on Monday, under examination by Mr. Lally, you've seen a shoe missing.
Correct.
Pedestrian strikes, correct?
Yes.
Those are high speed, extremely high speed incidents, correct?
Yes.
60 plus miles an hour, right?
I can't recall all the pedestrian strikes I've been to as far as the miles per hour the vehicle is traveling.
Trooper Parker, let me ask you the question again. Have you ever, yes or no, have you ever, in your experience, seen a vehicle pedestrian incident in which the pedestrian has no bruises?
Objection.
Have you seen that?
I can't recall.
Okay, next question.
After you wrote, she hit him with her car, 5051 writes, oh, Jesus. And Bird writes, okay, that's fucked up, correct?
Correct.
And then you wrote what?
Intentional or not?
Intentional or not? Is that right?
Yes.
Your words.
Correct.
0095 then chimes in, gotcha. He was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him? Question mark, correct?
Correct.
And you wrote what?
That's another animal we won't be able to prove.
That's another animal we won't be able to prove, correct?
Correct.
Trooper Proctor, you knew that there were going to be things in this case, even 16 hours into this, that you just admitted you would have zero proof of, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Did you mean by that statement that this was one of several things that you knew we would not be able to prove?
That statement, that's another animal we won't be able to prove, references the intentional or not part.
You didn't care at that point when you wrote that, you didn't care what you could or could not prove, did you?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Isn't that what you meant?
No.
You had a narrative that you had developed, and you would pursue it no matter what the proof was. That's what you meant by that statement, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently, Mr.
Did you mean by that, thank you, Your Honor, I didn't mean to step on your words. Did you mean by that statement that you were going to pursue this case no matter what the proof might be?
What I meant by that statement was if Miss Reed backed into Mr. O'Keefe intentionally or not.
Interestingly, though, that statement came on the heels of he was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him. And you wrote in response to that question, that's another animal we won't be able to prove. Correct?
That's not what I was responding to. I was responding to the intentional or not part.
So you're responding to your own statement.
Correct.
Okay. 0095 then writes, what's the name of the Canton cop living in Canton? The other one involved. Correct?
Yes.
In other words, that person was asking, tell me the name of the homeowner. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The guy that's the cop, right?
Correct.
And you ignored that question for a second time. Is that right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, not one time, not once in this entire group chat did you disclose the name Brian Albert, did you?
I don't believe so, no.
You were actively trying to hide Brian Albert's name, at least from this conversation.
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that what you were trying to do?
Absolutely not.
But you had no problem sharing John O'Keefe's name with your buddies from high school, right?
Correct.
And you had no problem sharing Karen Reed's name with your buddies from high school, correct?
I don't believe I named the defendant.
Not yet, you didn't. Later in the chat.
Okay, correct.
5051 then writes, the BPD have any jurisdiction here because it was their own? Question mark. Is that right?
Yes.
And a few texts later, if you look down a few texts, at about 11 o'clock, you see a text that starts, nah, cat.
I do so, yes.
You responded, quote, nah, N-A-H, nah, cat, K-A-T-T. It's the total opposite. They have to recuse themselves. Same with Canton. Correct?
That text ends as they have to recuse themselves.
You then text back, I'm sorry, can I have a moment?
Yes.
Flip the next page.
I see where you're at, sir.
How did you end that text?
Same with Canton.
Meaning Canton has to recuse itself also, correct?
That was my understanding.
So by 11 p.m. on January 29th, 2022, there was no question in your mind, Trooper Proctor, that the Canton Police Department was recused from this investigation in all particulars, correct?
That they had taken a step back from participating, yes.
Right. Well, there's one way to put it. They've taken a step back from participating. Another way to put it is they recused themselves completely, correct?
Correct.
They were not going to be, at least in your mind, they were not to be involved in any way, just like Boston PD was not to be involved in any way. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that what you were thinking?
It was my understanding they were not going to be involved.
Now, if we could turn to page 2537. "5051 writes, but I assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops, correct?
Yes.
And Bird writes, something stinks, correct?
Correct.
And then Trooper Proctor, you responded, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So in that text exchange, you were saying, yeah, we're out to make it cut and dry, correct?
No.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. You didn't, did you?
I did not write that.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to make sure that we investigate this thing fully and thoroughly before making any decisions. You didn't say that, did you?
I did not.
You wrote, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And the reason you wrote that is because you knew, as the text above it says, this has to be cut and dry because it involves cops, right?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that the reason you wrote it?
No, Your Honor.
And then you indicated, we're going to put serious charges on the girl. Who did you mean by the girl, by the way?
The defendant.
Karen Reed?
Yes, sir.
So the way that you were going to make it cut and dry, pretty simple. Just pin it on the girl, right?
Objection.
Is that right?
Absolutely not. Follow the facts and the evidence from that day on the 29th, and everything led to Miss Reed hitting Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
But that wasn't the question that you were answering, was it? We're going to follow the evidence and make sure we do this thoroughly. The question you were answering was, I assume you guys, you, Trooper Proctor, and your team are going to, quote, make it cut and dry, since it involves cops, meaning Brian Albert, correct?
Incorrect. Doesn't matter to me if the homeowner's a cop, if the victim's a police officer. Myself and everyone in my office investigated this case that Saturday, had an overwhelming amount of evidence that Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe. So it didn't matter to us what their occupation was.
We'll see. Let's keep reading, shall we? 5051, a little further down, says, gotta be, I could only imagine what internal affairs at BPD are trying to get out there. Correct?
Correct.
Meaning, this person, 5051, was opining, at least in your mind, you interpreted that as being Boston police are going to have a lot to answer for, given the fact that another Boston police officer was found dead on that officer's lawn. Correct?
Objection.
What were you thinking?
Can't speak to the mindset to that comment. I wasn't sure how to interpret that one.
All right, next question, Mr. Jackson.
Then 5051 changes gears, and he writes, she hot at least? Correct?
Yes.
And what was your response to that?
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt.
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt. That's what you wrote, correct?
Correct.
16 hours into this investigation.
Yes.
Into your objective and unbiased, thorough investigation, correct?
Correct.
But sir, you didn't have all accounts, did you?
What I meant by that was
Did you or did you not have all accounts in your investigation?
the accounts we had was Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle, discovered taillight pieces at the scene. Those are the accounts we had.
The accounts
And
you
then-
had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The accounts you had, Trooper Proctor, were from two people named McCabe and one named Albert, who happened to be the homeowner and a Boston cop. Those are the accounts from recipient witnesses that you had, correct?
There was another additional witness that we had investigators that interviewed, Miss Roberts as well.
And from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. That was your decision 16 hours into the investigation, correct?
Yes.
And the other decision that you made and the other determination you came to was my client, Karen Reed, was a whack job cunt, right?
Yes.
What else did you say in response to, she's hot at least? Or she hot at least, question mark.
So following that text, I responded, yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Miss Reed,
Weird Fall River accent, though. You talking about her, the way she talks?
the accent.
And no ass. Now you're talking about her body, her physique, correct?
Yes.
You think that's appropriate?
Absolutely not.
And then Bird chimes in with a little comedy. Not newsworthy then, correct?
Correct.
In other words, well, she didn't have an ass. Nothing to see here, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was 0 chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's fucked.
0 chance she skates. She's fucked, right?
Correct.
You decided on the 29th of January, 17 hours into this investigation, you decided individually, Trooper Proctor, you're not only going to put it on the girl, you decided you're going to make sure this is cut and dry, and the way you're going to do it is to make sure that she's fucked. That's what you were saying.
Objection.
All right, so that's sustained. You can, the content's fine. You have to ask it differently.
17 hours into this investigation, Trooper Proctor, you made the decision that you were going to put it on Miss Reed, didn't you? Put the case on Miss Reed. She was going to catch the case, correct?
No, absolutely not.
What did you mean then when you said she's fucked?
After the day's investigation with multiple troopers conducting multiple tasks and a debriefing at Canton PD amongst detectives in my office, we went through the overwhelming amount of evidence against Miss Reed that she struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle. That's what I meant by that comment.
What you meant by that comment, Trooper Proctor, was you were going to make sure because 5051 had said she's going to skate. She's skating. When you said 0 chance she skates, she's fucked. What you meant was I am going to make sure Ms. Reed doesn't skate. She's fucked. That's what you meant, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then Bird decides to chime in. Good, no ass bitch, right?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And how did you respond to Bird saying, good, no ass bitch?
I laughed.
Thought that was funny, did you? Trooper Proctor? Thought that was funny?
It was unprofessional of me. That's something I shouldn't have done.
Well, I think we all know it was unprofessional. It was a lot of things. I'm asking
Yep.
you, did you think it was funny?
Well, according to my response at the time, apparently.
Then you sent a picture, just to add to it, to pile on, of Miss Reed being arrested, correct?
I don't... Not sure if that came from me, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. Are you there, Trooper Proctor?
Yes.
The date is now February 2nd, 2022. And a person by the name of Doc writes, is that chick a smoke? Correct?
Correct.
Who's the chick?
Miss Reed.
And you write E-H, right?
Yes.
And then you write nutbag, as Chief would say, correct?
Correct.
Who's Chief?
A friend of mine.
And then you write what?
She's got a leaky balloon knot.
Trooper Proctor, explain to the jurors what a balloon knot is.
Your, essentially, I guess your rectum area.
Your anus?
Yes.
That's what you were referring to about Miss Reed?
Yes.
You were making fun of her because you believed at that time that it leaked? That's how you were treating Miss Reed? Yes or no?
Yes.
And then you followed that up just to make sure you cleared up any mistake about what you meant with leaks poo, correct?
Objection.
All right, so I'm going to strike that. You can get this in, but do it the right way, Mr. Jackson.
You followed that up with the phrase leaks poo, didn't you?
I did.
Again, another reference to Miss Reed's medical issues and medical conditions, correct?
Correct.
Specifically focused on her anus, correct?
In reference, yes.
Were you aware at the time that you wrote this that Miss Reed had suffered a colectomy surgery, very serious surgery?
I was not, sir, no.
Were you aware that she had had 10 surgeries in 18 months, several years prior? 10.
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that she had serious medical issues, gastrointestinal medical issues, that she suffered when she was a victim of for years? Did you know that?
Objection.
Sustained.
But you decided that you're going to take another shot at her and talk about her anatomy.
1 second, sir. I'm sorry. Outside.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. You decided that you were going to take another shot at her and talk about her anatomy as a balloon knot, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
At this point, Trooper Proctor, Miss Reed was just reduced to a punchline to you, wasn't she?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, you weren't done yet. This chat doesn't end yet, does it?
No, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. On the same day, February 2nd, 2022, about 4:15 p.m., a person by the name of Whitey wrote, "What are you guzzling on?" Correct?
Yes.
And you wrote, "Nothing, writing a warrant." Is that right?
Correct.
Whitey then shares some sort of a video, correct?
Yes.
You remember that video being of the 1980s band Warrant?
I don't recall the video he sent.
0095 laughed and then wrote, "Wait, why does her asshole leak?" Correct?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And then what did Doc write in response to that?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. I'll see it. Sidebar, take that down, please.
Without reference to-
Take that down.
Without reference to the specifics of what was...
I'm going to see counsel at sidebar.
Trooper Proctor, without getting to the specifics of the words used in the following, in the next exchange that you're looking at, it's fair to say that your high school buddies then continued to discuss Miss Reed's medical issues, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained. Come on, Mr. Jackson. That isn't what you said you'd ask. Go ahead and ask the question you said you'd ask.
Was there a continued discussion that finished on this subject matter?
Yes.
On Monday, you indicated that your conduct in this case, and specifically your conduct as reflected in these messages, how did you put it? It did not affect the integrity of the investigation, of your investigation, correct? That's what you said to the jurors.
Correct.
Do you know what the definition of integrity is?
Doing the right thing when no one's looking.
It means the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that integrity means being honest and having strong moral principles?
I believe that's part of it as well.
Do you stand by that testimony that you were showing strong moral principles in this investigation, sir?
In the investigation part, absolutely. Through these text messages, absolutely not. They were juvenile and regrettable.
When you say they're juvenile and regrettable, it sounds like you're almost apologizing to the jury for your conduct. Is that what you're doing?
For those texts? Objection.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, have you ever apologized to Miss Reed?
Objection.
Sustained.
As a lead investigator in this case, you were tasked with the responsibility of making sure that the investigation remained free of any conflicts of interest. That's part of your job, correct?
Correct.
Throughout the pendency of this investigation, in this case. You've denied having any conflict of interest in this case. Isn't that right?
Correct.
In fact, a couple of months ago, in February of 2024, you testified in a different proceeding. Is that right?
Yes.
You testified under oath in that proceeding on February 1st that you did not know any members of the Albert family or McCabe family. Correct?
Certain members of the Albert family I did not know. I know Chris and Julie and Colin. I don't know the McCabe's.
That wasn't my question. Did you testify? Let's take them one at a time. Did you testify under oath, same oath you took here today, in a former proceeding in February of 2024 that you did not know and did not have any relationship with members of the Albert and McCabe families? Did you?
I haven't had a chance to review those minutes. I've only had one opportunity to, and that was a couple months ago. So I would want to review those minutes in order to answer that accurately.
You can't remember how you testified, whether or not you knew or had relationships with the Alberts and McCabe's?
Objection.
Sustained.
As you sit here right now, you need to refresh your recollection. You can't remember what you said?
Objection.
Do you remember what you said?
During that proceeding, no.
Would it refresh your recollection if you took a look at those grand jury minutes?
Yes.
What page, Mr. Jackson?
This is page 01563. If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
If you'd review that and look up when you're finished. There you go.
Okay.
Would that refresh your recollection about a question and answer that you had, or series of questions and answers that you had while you were testifying under oath in that other proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Objection. May we approach?
Yes.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. You were asked the question, quote, did you communicate with First Assistant DA Beelan that you did not know and had no relationship with the Albert and McCabe families? And you answered, quote, to the best of my recollection, the same conversation took place with everyone I talked to about this, because it's the same answer. It's the facts that I shared with everyone. Question, meaning you told First Assistant Beelan that you didn't know, didn't have a relationships with
Objection, Your Honor.
members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So your question is whether he said this?
Correct. Whether that's his testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that's your testimony that you, in fact, told members of the DA's office that you did not know and did not have a relationship with the Alberts or McCabe's. Is that right?
I did not know the McCabe's. I don't know most of the Alberts, and I have little to no relationship with Chris and Julie. So that's what I meant by that answer.
Well, the question wasn't, did you know most of the Alberts? The question was, did you have a relationship with, or did you know the Alberts? And your answer was, no.
No, I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
Or know them.
I don't know the McCabe's. I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
So you do
You
know
asked-
the Alberts, correct?
I know some of them, Julie and Chris.
And Colin, correct?
Correct, and Colin.
And you knew the Alberts when you gave this testimony in February of 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, they asked if there was any relationships.
And let's try this again. Meaning you told First Assistant Beeland that you didn't know, didn't have relationships with members of the Alberts and members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct. Was that ambiguous in your mind?
The way I interpreted relationships was basically being like friends or, communications, frequent communications. That's how I interpreted
Well, that might have been a
relationships.
good time to pipe up and say, well, I know Chris and I know Julie and I know Colin, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
That might have been a good time to answer the question, I know these three individuals from the Albert family, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
But your answer was one word, correct, right?
Yes.
You further testified that you never have gone to any supervisor at Massachusetts State Police to disclose even a potential conflict of interest in this case that you might have, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated the needs never come up. Is that right?
Correct.
You also told ADA Lally that you, quote, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families, correct?
Correct.
And that's just not true, is it? You did know, you do know members of the Albert family. Isn't that right?
It's different from having a relationship with people.
But what about part of the question, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families? How about that part of the question?
Well, that's lumped in with the McCabe's. I don't know the McCabe family, sir.
I see. So what you did, Trooper Proctor, is you dissected the sentence, and where relationships are concerned, you ignored that in terms of the Alberts because you don't have relationships. Where no is concerned, you link that to the McCabe's because you don't know the McCabe's. That's what you did?
No.
Objection.
So it's sustained. You can ask it. You can break it down, Mr. Jackson.
Not sure I can. I'll ask it a different way. How about if I just ask it this way? That was a lie, wasn't it?
No, absolutely not.
You stand by that testimony?
Yes.
That you don't know them at the time that you testified, that you didn't know the Alberts or any members of the Albert family?
They don't have relationships with them.
Okay. My question is, you keep going back to relationships. I'm asking you, did you testify that you didn't know them?
Objection.
I'll let him have it. Do you understand the question, Trooper?
And it was Chris, Julie, and Colin.
So if you were to say, I don't know any members of the Albert family, that would have been a lie, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your Honor, this is the point at which I intend to turn to tab 3 and moving the approach.
Okay. Jurors, feel free to stand.
Yeah, just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you've indicated that your sister is one of your best friends, maybe your best friend.
Yes.
Courtney Proctor, that's your name? Courtney
Correct.
Proctor, Elberg?
I'm sorry?
Her last name?
Elberg.
Elberg, with an L. And you're aware that she is also very, very good friends with Jillian Daniels, Julie Albert.
Correct.
Are you aware of any circumstance in which any of the Alberts have been over to your parents' house?
Yes.
Have you ever been over to your parents' house when any of the Alberts have been at your parents' house?
Yes.
Those Alberts include Chris Albert, Julie Albert, Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, you were on or around January 29th, 2022, you were close enough friends with Julie Albert that she had your personal cell phone in her cell phone, correct? And vice versa.
I wouldn't classify us as close friends at all.
Okay, let me get back to my question. Did you have her cell phone in your phone, and did she have yours?
I can't recall if I believe I had her stored in my phone.
Tab 4. All right, if you would turn to tab 4,
And what was this marked for ID?
this was,
Or tell me the numbers at the bottom.
oh, I've got the sheet right here, I've got a cheat sheet. Tab 4 is triple B,
Okay.
as in Bravo. And Your Honor, for the court, I'm looking at page 2625. You have that in front of you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the participants in this chat?
I do.
The number ending in 5374, you recognize it as being from Julie Albert?
Based off the content of the message, yeah, I recognize this text message from Julie.
And she texts, "This is the weekend I've been waiting for. Michael, please send ski videos if CP doesn't share with me," with a laughing face, correct?
Correct.
That text was sent on February 24th, 2022, wasn't it?
Yes.
That was less than a month after Mr. O'Keefe's death, isn't that right?
Correct.
And less than a month after you had been assigned to the investigation in which Julie Albert was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her husband, Chris Albert, was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her son, you knew, Colin, was involved as well, correct?
Yes.
Who is CP in that text message?
It's a nickname I have for my sister.
Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
Okay.
Some time. Can we move to Trooper Proctor to tab 5, please? That's triple C as in Charlie. Do you have that in front of you, sir?
Yes.
And this would be page 2664. Can you return to that page, please?
Okay.
Trooper Proctor, on January 19th, 2022, 10 days before Mr. O'Keefe's death, you were texting with your sister about whether Julie Albert might be available to babysit for your own son, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, your relationship with the Alberts was close enough that you would consider leaving your own child in the hands of Julie Albert as a babysitter, as a caregiver for your toddler, correct?
I wouldn't say close enough. I've hired babysitters that I've had out, but I don't know.
But Julie Albert was among them, correct?
Yes, she was an option to watch my child.
And then you personally interviewed Julie Albert and Chris Albert in this case on February 10th, 2022.
Sergeant Buchanan and I did, yes.
And you didn't mention a thing about your relationship with Julie Albert, Chris Albert, or Colin Albert in any report that you ever drafted in this case, did you?
I did not.
Not one word, correct?
No, sir.
You interviewed Julie and Chris Albert at about 5:30 p.m. on the 10th of February, isn't that right?
Yes.
Did either of them, Julie or Chris Albert, mention that their son Colin Albert had been at 34 Fairview Road on the night in question, January 29th?
I'd have to reread the report to refresh my memory on their statements.
Well, let me ask it a different way. If I may have just a moment.
Yes.
You wrote a report on October 12th, 2022, correct?
For which,
Concerning your interview with,
Why don't you show it to him?
I may have the wrong report. Do you recall, Trooper Proctor, ever mentioning that whether or not Julie and Chris mentioned to you that their son had been at 34 Fairview on January 29th? Do you recall that as you sit here?
to the best of my recollection, no.
It was a very short interview with Julie and Chris, was it not?
Typical length for the information they had to offer.
So you started the interview about 5:30 p.m. It must have been relatively short because you received a phone call by 6:17 from Julie Albert herself, correct?
I don't have the call detail record in front of me, but okay, yes.
Let's look at tab 6, please. Oh, it may not be in your book.
It's not, sir.
Okay, fair enough. You indicated that you might need to look at a phone record or a phone log to determine whether or not that call was made and what time it was made, correct?
If you have that,
May I
please.
approach you on it?
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a highlighted portion to the Proctor. Just focus your attention on that and let me know if that refreshes your reflection.
It does, sir. Thank you.
May I approach?
Yes.
You received after your interview, you received a phone call from Julie Albert about 6:17, about 45 minutes after you began the interview and then left, correct?
Yes.
6:21, you called her back and you spoke for 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you discuss the interview?
I don't recall the content of that conversation.
And of course, you never memorialized that in any report, did you? The fact that you had a subsequent phone call with Julie Albert on your personal cell phone.
I did not.
Let's turn to tab 5 one more time. If you could turn to page 2677. Trooper Proctor, after your interview with Julie Albert, your sister, Courtney, texted you, "How did it go at Julie's? She was so nervous." You recall that?
Yes.
In fact, you responded to that with a ha, 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 ha. 4 ha's, right? And then why, question mark, correct?
Correct.
Then you responded, "It was fine, just a quick convo," correct?
Yes.
You were literally reporting back to your sister about the progress of your investigation in a homicide investigation, weren't you?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Were you reporting your progress to your sister about your investigation?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
You are unmuted.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Were you reporting your progress of your investigation back to your sister, Courtney Proctor?
No, absolutely not.
But you did say that the conversation, the formal interview went fine. It was just a quick convo, correct?
In response to my sister indicating Julie was nervous, that's why I told her it was fine.
Trooper Proctor, Julie and Chris Albert were not actually treated like witnesses in a murder investigation. They were treated more like friends. Wouldn't you agree?
Objection.
Is that true?
Absolutely not.
We've established that you're very close with your sister, Courtney, correct?
Correct.
You provided your sister with updates on important advancements during the course of your investigation into this case. Did you not periodically?
I made her aware of newsworthy stuff.
That started as early as January 29th, 2022. Isn't that right?
Don't have the exact date or content.
Well, the day of the incident, you began letting her know that you were involved, that you had been assigned, what the status was,
Yes.
the nature of the case, the fact
Correct.
that it was a homicide, correct?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you discussed who the players were, who the people were that were involved. Isn't that right?
I just mentioned Julie and Chris were out earlier in the evening.
So you mentioned the Alberts, correct?
Julie and Chris, yes.
You also mentioned the McCabe's too, didn't you? At some point.
Yes.
Yeah. At 2668, Your Honor, that's the page that I'm referring to. Okay. This one. You write homicide, correct?
So I said 2668.
Correct. If I have my page number correct.
You're on the right page, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
You wrote the word homicide. Is that right?
Yes.
You were describing to your sister the nature of the case that you are now assigned. Is that right?
Correct.
She wrote the Canton thing is a homicide, and you wrote don't say a word to anyone. Correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote of course not. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And then you wrote what?
In the very least, it's suspicious.
In the very least, it's suspicious. Correct?
Correct.
So at that time, at least at the time that you wrote that text on the 29th at 3:05 in the afternoon, you believed that the case was suspicious, right?
This was before we found significant pieces of evidence.
So you believed that it was suspicious that it may involve the Alberts, right?
Absolutely not.
She then writes, this is your livelihood, didn't she?
She did.
Meaning this kind of case could make or it could break your career, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
She then wrote, I would never mess with that. Is that right?
Yes.
Your sister, Trooper Proctor, was warning you that you shouldn't be investigating a case in which close friends or family members were involved.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you take her text, this is your livelihood, I would never mess with that, as a warning from her that you shouldn't be investigating a case that involved close friends?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Absolutely not. That was in response to don't say a word to anyone. And that was how I interpreted this is your livelihood. I would never mess with that.
A couple of minutes later, 3:07 on January 29th, you told your sister, quote, Julie and Chris were at the bar with the victim and girlfriend. Got to interview them. Is that right?
Yes.
So you were telling Courtney, your sister, updates on what your investigation advancements were, correct?
Just
You're
that
gonna
part.
interview. Why are you going to interview him?
Yes.
She wrote, you got to be kidding me, correct?
Correct.
Did you take that as you got to be kidding me? The Alberts are involved?
No, absolutely not.
And then you wrote, it's not a big deal, correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, I bet I know the person. Sounds like it is, meaning it is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what she meant with those messages there.
But she did write, I bet I know the person, didn't she?
She did write that, yes.
And you know she's very close with the Alberts, correct?
And she's close with Julie and Chris.
You then wrote, no, I meant, or you wrote not. I think you meant no. I meant that they were at the bar with him, correct?
Yes.
She writes, yeah, I got that part. And then she continues on, but I know a lot of their friends, correct?
Yes.
Did you see a problem in this exchange?
Nothing jumped out at me.
Your sister's literally explaining that your family friends are suspects or possible suspects in a murder investigation that you're in charge of, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
On January 30th, 2022 at 9:13 in the morning, your sister texted you again, quote, Jesus Christ. The party was at one of the Alberts, correct?
Yes.
And you two were discussing the fact that, to put it in her words, Jesus Christ, these are our friends, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
How did you take her Jesus Christ? The party was at one of the Alberts with 2 exclamation points. How did you take that?
That's the way I'm interpreting my sister's text messages was that surprised, shocked that this is where Mr. O'Keefe was found on the front lawn of that residence.
Could it be, Jesus Christ, we know these people?
Again, that's how I read that message.
You don't deny, Trooper Proctor, that you were routinely disclosing to your sister pretty intimate details about the investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say intimate. I'd say newsworthy stuff or just generic, nothing
Well,
too specific.
Newsworthy, would you have gone to the news at this point in the investigation? Would you have gone to the news and said, Julie and Chris were at the bar, I gotta go interview them?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you do, Trooper?
No, I would not do that, sir.
So it's not newsworthy. These were details, internal details about the investigation, weren't they?
Yes.
And you were sharing them with your sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And Courtney Proctor's best friend is Jillian Daniels, and one of her closest friends is Julie Albert, right?
Correct.
Then on February 1st, 2022, your sister texts you that she's actually meeting with Julie Albert, didn't she?
Yes.
And that was before you ever interviewed Julie, correct?
Yes.
So it appears that Courtney was providing information to Julie of some sort before you were able to actually interview her. Is that right?
Objection.
Sustained.
She was, well, let me ask it this way. You don't deny that Courtney was meeting with Julie before you interviewed her, correct?
Correct.
And you don't deny that you had been providing information about the case with Courtney before you interviewed Julie, correct?
Provided information that Julie and Chris were at the waterfall and I needed to interview them. Yes, that's the information I shared.
And who knows what you shared verbally, not in text messages, correct?
Objection.
Did you, we have text messages, Trooper Proctor. Did you share other information on phone calls with Courtney?
No.
So the only information we're to believe, you talk to her 5 to 6 times a day, the only information that you claim you shared with Courtney about the details of the investigation are contained in these texts which we have.
Objection.
I'll let you answer that. Can you answer that?
The information that I shared with my sister is contained within these texts, yes.
You never discussed this case verbally, over the phone or in person with Courtney.
On the phone, I'm sure there's been conversations that's things that have been newsworthy items that have gone to the news. There's definitely been conversations in that regard.
Then before you ever interviewed Julie, your sister informed you that Julie actually wanted to get you a gift for your participation on this case, correct?
Yes.
In tab 5, let's turn to page 2672, Trooper Proctor. With court's permission, may we publish?
Yes.
Tab page 2672. You see the text from you, what's up?
Yes.
And what's Courtney Proctor's response?
Nothing. I just saw Julie, and she said when this is all over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. And I respond with, get Elizabeth one.
Hang on just a second. Let's take them one at a time. You were asked about this on direct examination by Mr. Lally, right?
Correct.
And you looked at the jurors, paused, and said, I never asked for a gift. I never received a gift. Elizabeth never asked for a gift. She never received a gift. You remember that?
Correct.
You said you never asked for a gift, correct?
Correct.
What's your next text?
Get Elizabeth one.
Get Elizabeth one what?
Referring to a gift.
Right. So you did, in fact, ask for a gift, didn't you?
For my wife who had been home with my children for the last 10 nights.
From Julie Albert
Yes.
for your participation on this case.
I don't know if that's yes.
Well, Courtney Proctor answers that question by saying, because I guess her and Chris were friends and John, and she's so proud of you for leading this investigation, correct?
Correct.
You're aware during the course of your investigation, well, let me ask it this way. Let me ask a foundational question. Do you pull phone records as a matter of course in investigations of this nature?
Yes.
Did you pull phone records in this case, variously?
The phone records of
Of anybody? Witnesses, suspects,
not witnesses, Mr.
real people, whatever?
We didn't pull full phone records of witnesses.
Victim?
Victim and Miss Reed.
During the course of your investigation, did you become aware that there were 67 calls between Julie Albert and your sister, Courtney, in the months following John O'Keefe's death?
Objection.
We're going to sustain that objection.
Did you become aware during the course of your investigation of the level of communication between Julie Albert, one of the witnesses on the case, and your sister?
Objection.
I'm sustaining that objection. You can come try and convince me otherwise if you want, Mr. Jackson.
I can ask it a different way, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you ever seek information about phone calls and communications that Julie Albert may or may not have been having with anybody else?
No.
Didn't download her phone, didn't seek her phone records?
No.
Did Courtney ever tell you she had consistent communications with Julie Albert? Or did you know that otherwise?
Objection.
During the months, let me ask it this way, during the months following John O'Keefe's death, you did continue to have consistent communications with Courtney, though, didn't you?
Yes, I speak to my sister every day.
Trooper Proctor, were you using Courtney, your sister, as an intermediary between you and Julie Albert?
Absolutely not.
You were well aware from the very beginning of your investigation that Colin Albert was, in fact, at 34 Fairview on the night in question, right?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you testified at the grand jury, the state court grand jury on this case, that you knew that Colin Albert was at the location, right?
Yes.
Did you make any concerted efforts to keep Colin Albert's name out of this investigation?
No.
Why is it, Trooper Proctor, that Colin Albert's name fails to appear in a single police report until July 18, 2023?
Colin Albert was not at the home. He left at approximately 12:10 a.m. before anyone from the waterfall had arrived back there.
Let's look at, obviously, part of the job of an investigator is to be as complete and thorough as possible, correct?
Yes.
You don't just take someone's word for something. You look for corroborating evidence, don't you?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you wouldn't take a witness's word for almost anything in a reasonable investigation, would you?
Objection.
Would you? So you can have that.
If I find the witness to be credible and have no reason to lie, then yes, I would take their word.
Would you try to support a witness's statement, or witnesses with an apostrophe, S apostrophe, their statements with corroborating evidence?
Yeah, potentially.
That corroborating evidence might be talking to other witnesses, right?
Yes.
It might be looking at cell phone data, correct?
Correct.
You might be looking at geolocation data, correct?
Yes.
You're trying to find out where someone is. You might pull information from their phone concerning geolocation data, right?
Yes.
You might pull cell tower information, right?
If if there's a need for it.
There's myriad ways that you can find out whether someone's telling the truth about where they were and when they were there, right?
Right.
Let's take a look at your handwritten notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel on October 5th, 2022. This should be tab 7, Trooper Parker.
What is it for identification?
My mistake. I thought it was in the tab. It's not. This is a 3-page document. I'll just refresh his recollection with this.
Okay, show Mr. Lally and then go ahead.
Of course. Let me ask a foundational question, Trooper Proctor. Do you remember exactly what's in your notes from a conversation that you had on October 5th, 2022?
I don't know.
Do you think it would refresh your recollection to take a look at your handwritten notes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Take a look at that. And first, let me just ask you if that refreshes your recollection.
It does, sir.
Are those your notes, your handwritten notes from this, at least partially from this investigation?
Yes.
Does that reflect your handwritten notes based on a conversation that you had with Juliana Nagel on or about October 5th, 2022? Mary, you
Yes.
Does this appear to be an accurate representation or accurate copy of your notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel?
Yes.
Your Honor, with court's permission, I changed my mind. I would like to have this marked as next.
Introduced into evidence?
Correct.
Is there an objection?
Yes, sir.
And the objection sustained.
Is it true that in your handwritten notes, you list the following individuals based on Juliana Nagel's conversation with you as being at 34 Fairview? Brian, Juliana, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and Sarah Levinson. Correct?
Correct.
You then drafted a report memorializing your conversation with Juliana Nagel, correct?
Yes.
And that report is a formal memorialization of your interview based on your investigation, correct?
Yes, a summary of the conversation for the interview.
And that report is the thing that's turned over to the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes.
And the report is the thing that's entered into discovery and provided to the defense?
Correct.
And isn't it true that in that report, you list the individuals that were at 34 Fairview as Brian, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Sarah Levinson? Is that correct?
Yes.
What's the one name that was left out of your report on that list?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Was there one name left out?
The-
Break that down, Mr. Jackson.
Sure. Isn't it true that in your report, you excluded the one name, Colin Albert, from the list of individuals that were in your notes?
Yes, because he arrived later in the evening. The other females were there from the start.
At the time that you wrote your report, the formal report, this one, you did not believe that your handwritten notes were also going to be disclosed, did you?
I knew that was a possibility.
When you finally did get around to interviewing Colin Albert, you personally conducted that interview, did you not?
Yes.
Colin
Along with
Albert
Trooper
told
Zach
you-
Clark.
One at a time.
I'm sorry.
Finish your answer, Trooper.
Please go ahead.
Yes, along with Trooper Zach Clark in my office.
Colin Albert told you that he was picked up by Allie McCabe from his uncle's house at 12:10 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Allie McCabe also told you that she picked up Colin Albert at 34 Fairview at 12:10 a.m. and then dropped him off at his house, correct?
Correct.
And then she indicated that she went straight home after that, right?
Yes.
Did you conduct any further investigation to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were actually telling the truth about that time?
We did not.
You just took them at their word, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you realize you had a forensic image, at the time, you had a forensic image of Jennifer McCabe's cell phone in your possession, right?
Correct.
You're also aware that she has a Life 360 app on her phone that tracks the location of Allie McCabe, correct?
I was not aware the app tracked her daughter. I knew of the Life 360 app, but I wasn't aware of the capability of it tracking her daughter.
Did you bother to look at Jennifer McCabe's Life 360 app to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were telling the truth about the time that they supposedly left 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Did you do that alone?
I did not.
Can we take a look at tab 8? Do you recall looking at all at a Life 360 app or its data from Celebrate Report?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you or did you not look at any data from Life 360 from Jennifer McCabe's phone?
Objection.
All right, so this is a good time to take a morning recess, and I'll see Constable Zach. 15, 20 minutes. All right, Mr. Jackson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Trooper Proctor, did you include in your investigative file any Celebrite report related to the Life 360 app that was on Ms. McCabe's phone that you earlier testified to?
Trooper Garino was our cell phone expert, kind of handled that, so I'm not positive if that report, if he generated that report.
Okay, so it goes without saying, I shouldn't say that because if it goes without saying, I shouldn't say it. Did you review a Life 360 report in an effort to determine whether or not Colin and Allie were telling the truth?
No.
You grew up in Canton, did you not?
Yes.
I don't want an address, but just generally as a crow flies, how close would you say you live from the Albert residence at the former Albert residence at 34 Fairview in Canton?
2-3 miles?
How about from the McCabe residence? Again, don't give me any addresses.
Maybe a mile.
You know, given the fact that you grew up in Canton, that it's about a mile walk through some woods to get to Canton High School from 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
Did you have any Canton police officers canvass the area around the high school or filling stations around the high school, gas stations around the high school for video surveillance footage?
No.
Did you have any conversations with anybody from Canton about video surveillance concerning the high school and or surrounding gas stations?
Yes.
Who is that?
It was Officer Galanis.
Can you turn to tab 9, please? First, let me ask you if you recognize these texts with any individual.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize those texts?
That was a text communication between Officer Galanis and myself.
Taking a look at those text communications, do you see the inclusive dates of those on the face sheet
Yes,
document?
I do.
What are those inclusive dates?
First message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022, 1:02 p.m. Last message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022, 2:05 p.m.
These are texts on a single day, correct?
That's correct.
If you would look at page 2623. Your Honor, may I publish?
Is there any objection?
Same one, but
I'll let you publish it.
Thank you. Yes, you in this text, you're asking a member of the Canton Police Department to look around the surrounding area of 34 Fairview Road for camera equipment, correct?
I was asking if they had any knowledge of cameras in the area.
Okay. And of course, that was to an officer who was employed by which department?
Canton Police Department.
Which you knew at the time that you asked for assistance in February of 2022 had been recused from the case, correct?
Correct.
And should have no investigative involvement in the case, correct?
I did not request for them to pull video. I just simply asked what are some good cameras in the area.
Which is an assistance for you in your investigation, correct?
They have more knowledge in the area as far as useful cameras. So yes, I reached out regarding cameras in the area.
Or assistance from Canton PD officers, correct?
Yes.
Whom you knew to be recused.
Yes.
Correct? Yes. You specifically asked Officer Galanis whether, quote, the high school had cameras facing the street, correct?
Correct.
And Officer Galanis writes back, the Canton Mutual gas station has unreal cameras. That's how I picked up that kid, and it had him walking into the woods by the new street Larkin Court, correct?
Correct.
You responded, good to know, I'll add that to the list, correct?
Yes.
Did any of the reports you turned over in discovery ever mention the Canton Mutual gas station cameras or the cameras from Canton High School?
No, because we did not retrieve any video from those locations.
And you didn't mention in your report that you even sought the footage from those locations, correct?
I don't believe so.
You did say that you would add it to the, quote, list, is that right?
Yes.
And you're aware, obviously, as one of your responsibilities, to maintain and keep your handwritten notes from all communications, all investigative activities involved in the case, correct?
Yes.
And you have no notes on this conversation, correct?
Correct.
As the lead investigator, Trooper Proctor, you are responsible ultimately for deciding which witnesses will be interviewed and which witnesses will not be interviewed, correct?
Like I mentioned yesterday or Monday, it's a collaborative effort within the office, so we bounce ideas off each other as far as what witnesses need to be interviewed, et cetera. So it's more of a group effort, a group decision.
But as the case officer, you make some of the final decisions on who's going to be investigated, who's going to be interviewed, things of that nature, right?
I facilitate certain areas, yes.
I want to talk about some of the witnesses that you interviewed in the days and weeks immediately following Mr. O'Keefe's death. You interviewed Brian Albert, correct?
Correct.
Nicole Albert, yes?
Yes.
Chris Albert?
Yes.
Julie Albert?
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe?
Yes.
Her husband, Matt McCabe?
Correct.
All those individuals are related in one way or another, either through marriage or otherwise, to each other, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And you also interviewed Brian Higgins, is that right?
Yes.
I want to talk for a second about the individuals that you did not immediately choose to interview. Julie Nagel wasn't interviewed until October 2022, correct?
Correct.
That's 7 months after the incident, right?
Correct.
Sarah Levinson was not interviewed until October of 2022, also 7 months later, correct?
Correct.
Caitlin Albert was interviewed July 6th, 2023, correct?
Yes.
That's 16 months after the incident. Is that right?
Correct.
Brian Albert Jr., July 6th, 2023, right?
Yes, sir.
Allie McCabe, August of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's 18 months after the incident, correct?
Correct.
Heather Maxon, she was not interviewed until September 21st, 2023, 17 months later, correct?
Correct.
Or that's actually, my math is off, that's about 18 months later, is that right?
Correct.
Richard D'Antono, September 2nd, 2023, is that right?
Yes.
So you waited more than 18 months to interview him as well, is that right?
Yes.
And then Brian Loughran, snowplow driver, August 2023, 17 months after the incident, correct?
Correct.
I want to talk for a second about this last individual, Brian Loughran. He also goes by the name Lucky, is that right?
Yes.
Lucky Loughran. You testified under oath on April 21st, 2022 in the state court grand jury proceeding that no snowplow traveled down Fairview Road on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Why did you say that, Trooper Proctor?
That was based off interviews with Mr. Trotter that the plows weren't out until they met up at 2:30, and then, in my understanding, they were focusing on the main roadways.
You're aware that Michael Trotter testified in this case?
Okay.
Were you aware or not?
No.
Okay. You did, in fact, interview Michael Trotter, did you not?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Michael Trotter told you that, in fact, Brian Loughran was plowing 34 Fairview that morning?
Objection.
Is that what he told you?
I don't recall that statement from him.
Michael Trotter testified that that's what he told you. Do you have any quarrel with that?
Objection.
That's his statement.
In reality, Trooper Proctor, you did not want to speak to anybody in the weeks and months following this incident who didn't fit your narrative, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that true?
That's simply not true. Absolutely not.
Certainly didn't want to talk to anybody who could say that there was no body on the lawn at 2:30 in the morning. Is that right?
No, it's not true.
Are you aware that Lucky Loughran, in fact, did report that there was no body on
Objection,
the
Your
lawn?
Honor.
So the objection sustained. I'm going to strike now.
Did you include anything in your investigative report throughout the entire time you've been in charge of this investigation about Lucky Loughran and his observations?
Not until Sergeant Mechanic and I interviewed him.
And that was when?
I can't recall the exact date.
And that was after the defense brought him to your attention, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Not true?
Correct.
Are you still the case agent in charge of this case?
Yes.
As the lead investigator and the case agent, you're aware it's also your responsibility and your obligation to investigate all potential individuals, right? All potential suspects.
Yes.
You're obligated to investigate anybody who would have a motive, a means, and an opportunity to commit the crime or the offense, correct?
Correct.
Motive includes anything from financial gain to could just be revenge, right?
Yes.
Could be a lover's quarrel, correct?
Yes.
Or it could be someone who's interested in someone romantically, correct?
Could be an argument inside of a vehicle.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you? What
I
was your
didn't hear
answer?
So, or it could be an argument contained inside a vehicle as well.
Ah, yeah, which is the conclusion you jumped to 17 hours into your investigation, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
Is that right?
It's something, evidence we have contained within cell phones reiterates that fact.
When you decided that you were going to make sure that the girl, I think that's what you called her, the girl, was going to have serious charges brought against her 17 hours into your investigation, you didn't have any evidence whatsoever that there was an argument inside the vehicle, did you?
To go towards intent? No. But as far as the physical evidence goes, we have compelling evidence indicating Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
So you just did
Okay,
this.
Mr. Jackson, I just have to keep your voice up, Trooper Proctor. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
You just did this piecemeal. So when you decided that the girl, Miss Reed, was going to get serious charges against her, didn't have any indication of any intent. You just decided, oh, okay, I'm just going to go with physical evidence today. I'll figure out intent later. I'll figure out motive later, right?
Yes.
Motive, means, and opportunity. We talked a little bit about motive. What about means? The physical ability to commit the crime, right? That's obviously important.
Yes.
And the opportunity. It's a physical proximity to the incident, correct? Or the
Correct.
physical ability to commit the crime, correct?
Correct.
Did you investigate all potential suspects who would have had the motive, means, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe?
Yes, and that motive, means, factored in with the physical evidence pointed directly at Miss Reed. There's no one else had any motive. Mr. O'Keefe never went inside Fairview Road.
And you got all that, of course, from the Albertson case, right?
Yes.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Let's talk about Brian Higgins for a second. You know that name?
I do, sir.
You personally interviewed Mr. Higgins, correct?
Sergeant Mechanic and I did, yes.
You keep adding other people into the interviews. I'm asking what you did, not what you and somebody else did. Did you personally interview Brian Higgins?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, I did.
He's a fellow law enforcement officer, and you knew that, right?
Yes.
He was a colleague of yours, correct?
He worked in a different agency, yes.
You waited until February 10th to conduct a pre-scheduled interview with Mr. Higgins, didn't you?
Yes.
And you interviewed him in the presence of his attorney, correct?
Correct.
He told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed?
He did.
As a matter of fact, he told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed over text messages, but on at least one occasion that resulted in a kiss, correct?
Yes.
And then he also told you that he had taken the liberty to extract certain conversations from his own cell phone, right?
Correct.
And he brought you a hard copy of those text messages, right?
He did.
And you knew that those text messages were messages that he curated to give to you, right?
Yes.
He's the one that made the determination of what was important, what was not important to give to you, his interviewer, right?
Objection.
Was that your understanding, Trooper?
It was my understanding Mr. Higgins was being very forthcoming by providing those messages. It's not uncommon for witnesses to take screenshots or send us emails or send us text messages, so he just had a different means of producing text messages.
Well, you were actually asked that question in a different proceeding, under different questioning, and you were asked whether or not in your career as a law enforcement officer has any person or witness ever brought a self-extraction of text messages to an in-person interview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct.
And
Most
your answer was,
civil.
your answer was, Trooper Proctor, you had never experienced that in the history of your career, correct?
Correct.
So you became aware pretty early on that Mr. Higgins at least had a motive to want to visit harm on John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
Well, you knew he had this flirtatious relationship with Karen Reed, is that right?
Yes.
You became aware that he ignored, you saw the text messages, you became aware that Karen Reed actually ignored text messages from Mr. Higgins while at the Waterfall Bar and Grill with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
And you're aware that at 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, coaxing him to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar on this.
Yes. Thank you. You're aware that at 2:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, prompting him to go to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that one. Go ahead.
I don't recall that text.
Do you recall a text from Brian Higgins to John O'Keefe after they left Waterfall? Where are you at?
I don't recall that one either.
You also recognized that Brian Higgins certainly had the means to commit the crime, correct?
No, I don't.
He's a big guy. Certainly had the physical ability to get into a physical altercation with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Just because he's a big guy doesn't mean he doesn't have the means or the motive to hurt Mr. O'Keefe.
I wouldn't ask
They
you
were
about
friends.
I wasn't asking about motive. I'm asking about means. Could he do it? Could he throw a punch? Knock a guy down, knock a guy out?
I can't speak to his fighting ability, sir.
Well, you've met him, right?
That one interview, yes.
Yeah, he's huge. Do you agree?
Objection.
Sustained.
He's a big dude, right?
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Bigger than me, right?
Yeah.
Bigger than you.
Yep.
You knew that he was former military
I did, yes.
and is a trained ATF agent, federal agent, right?
Yes.
And you were in possession of video surveillance from the Waterfall Bar and Grill, correct?
Yes.
And literally in the minutes before John O'Keefe's death, you saw video surveillance of Brian Higgins and Brian Albert taking fighting stances with one another, correct?
I interpreted that as horsing around.
I didn't ask you how you interpreted it, Trooper Proctor. I asked you if you saw it.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you see it or not?
I did.
And what you saw was these guys taking fighting stances, correct?
Objection.
Is that what you saw?
Playful fighting stances.
But you waited until February 10th to interview him, correct?
Yes.
And you decided not to image his phone. Is that right?
Correct.
You didn't ask for consent to search his phone or to take his phone, correct?
No.
You didn't seek a search warrant to get his phone. Is that right?
No, sir.
Did you know that on January 29th at 2:22 a.m., there was a call between him and Brian Albert that morning?
I was not aware of that.
Might have been important to your investigation, don't you think?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Depends what I don't know what the call was about.
I'm sorry, finish that.
I don't know what the call was about. I don't know if they actually connected and communicated what the length of the call was, so
Right. And you never asked, did you?
I was unaware that call took place.
And you were unaware that that call took place because you didn't get his phone, Trooper Proctor, right?
Typically, we don't get witnesses' phones, sir.
You were unaware of that call at that time because you didn't seek his phone, correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
Correct.
Right. The medical examiner notified you on April 28th, 2022, that the manner of death, in her words, could not be determined. Is that right?
Yes,
She would not rule, at least in terms of the manner of death, would not rule this a homicide. Is that right?
that's correct.
And you agree that that's obviously a pretty significant finding.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Her finding doesn't alter how we conduct our investigation, whether if it's undetermined or ruled a homicide. We're still going to continue to investigate one way, regardless of her determination.
You obviously were not pleased with that. You were not pleased with that determination, right?
It didn't matter one way or the other because, like I said, we continue on with the investigation.
On April 28th, that same day, you received a text message from Trooper DeChico, correct?
Yes.
You turn to tab 11, please.
What's the ID number?
This is 2618. I'm sorry, tab 11
Triple
is
F.
GGG, triple G is in golf. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Do you have that in front of you, Trooper Proctor?
I do, sir.
You turn to page 2618. Do you see a text message received from Trooper DeChico with a photograph of the autopsy report?
Yes.
And that autopsy report indicates undetermined. Is that right?
For manner, yes.
In response, you wrote a text message to DeChico, correct?
I did.
What was your response?
Of course, it's undetermined.
And then what else did you write?
She was a whack job.
Of course it's undetermined. She was a whack job, right? Those are your two responses, correct?
Yes.
You were talking about Dr. Scorti-Bello, the female medical examiner who came to the determination that this was undetermined in terms of the manner of death, correct?
I'm not sure who I'm referencing as far as she was a whack job, but the of course it's undetermined is a sarcastic response from me.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
The reason you referred to Dr. Scorti-Bello as a whack job is because the cut and dry case that you had hoped for wasn't really going your way, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
When you referred to she's a whack job, were you referring to Dr. Scorti-Bello?
I don't recall.
Were you displeased with the undetermined finding instead of a homicide finding because that was an obstacle in your investigation?
Objection.
You can break that down.
Were you displeased about the undetermined finding?
No.
Would you have rather had a determined finding that it was a homicide?
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to my office. We still investigate the same exact way if it's ruled determined, undetermined, or homicide.
Well, then why would you say, of course it's undetermined? She was a whack job, sarcastically.
It's a sarcastic remark I made to Trooper DeChico.
Right, which sort of suggests displeasure rather than the reverse, right?
Objection.
You'd agree that it's extremely unusual for the manner of death to be undetermined in a homicide investigation you've worked on, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
How many murder cases in the history of your career have you worked on in which the medical examiner made the determination that the manner of death could not be determined?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a number on it. It's not a lot. I couldn't ballpark it for you, but I know it's not a lot.
Well, Trooper Proctor, you were asked this exact question in February of 2024 at another proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
And you indicated that you had never seen it in your entire career, correct?
I'm trying to run.
Well, you were asked the question, so first, what do you mean by, of course it's undetermined? And your answer was, I said it at the time, it was kind of like, not like figuratively, of course, it's an of course, like I had never really seen that before in a homicide, end quote. Correct?
Yes.
Your statement in February of 2024, under oath, was you'd literally never seen that in any homicide you've ever worked, right?
Yes.
After she reached that conclusion, you discussed this with one of your colleagues about how you tried to put pressure on her to change her or alter her opinion, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that
All
what
right.
you did?
Pressure? Absolutely not.
Let's turn to tab 12.
What's this for identification? Is do
This one, I'm just checking. This is HHH as in hotel. Your Honor, for this one, may I publish?
so I've got them mismarked. What's the bottom? What's the base
Sure,
stamp
it's
number?
2632.
Why don't you come to sidebar for
I'm
a
sorry,
minute, please?
the face page is 2628. Maybe that helps.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
Within that packet, we'll turn to 2632.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. To begin with, Trooper Proctor, do you recognize the face page of that series of text messages in tab 12?
Yes.
Is that the text messages between you and Trooper DeChico, one of your colleagues?
It is, yes.
Turn to page 2632, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead, sir.
Trooper DeChico texted you, rookie move, not going into a meeting with the ME and getting that homicide determination, correct?
Yes.
How did you interpret that? Rookie move, not getting that homicide determination.
You know, when Trooper DeChico, it's him busting my chops and joking with me.
Because you see it as your job, you and Trooper DeChico, to go in and get the homicide determination. That's your job, right?
Not at all, sir.
You're not looking so much for her opinion as looking to give her your opinion, right?
Absolutely not.
You responded, Yuri and I, who's Yuri?
Sergeant Buchanan.
Yuri and I had 2 conference calls with her, sent her numerous photos, etc. We laid out the entire case for her. That was your response, correct?
Yes.
You were explaining how much effort you went to try to get her to change your opinion to homicide, right?
Objection.
No, not at all.
DeChico then responds, not good enough. Should have had me and Jeff do it, right?
Yes, that was his response.
busting your chops that you didn't meet the standard of getting her to change her mind to make it a homicide, right? That's what he was busting your chops about.
We would never try to change the mind of a medical examiner. The doctor who conducts the autopsy often has questions. They want to know the facts, kind of what had transpired leading up to a victim's death. It happens not only in homicides, but the unattended deaths we also attend to, suicide and overdose. So it's common to have these conversations with doctors.
Right, but in response to getting the information that she made the determination and held on to it, that this was undetermined, your answer was, of course it's undetermined. She was just a whack job, right?
With sarcasm.
Ultimately, did the doctor change her opinion?
No.
But the determination of the medical examiner, that didn't matter to you, right? Because you had already decided you were going to charge Miss Reed with murder anyway.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, the determination did not matter as we continued on with the investigation.
Notwithstanding the medical findings in the case, correct? That it was not determined to be a homicide, right?
Considering the manner, but
And that's because even though in the words of the prior group chat that this whole thing stinks, you were going to make it cut and dry by putting it on the girl, putting serious charges on the girl, notwithstanding what the medical examiner said, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were actually asked this question, whether or not it would have an impact on your decision, notwithstanding what the medical examiner's decision was, correct? Your decision to charge her. Is that right?
yes.
On February 1st, 2024, you were asked, so what you're telling this grand jury today, and you expect this grand jury to believe that you didn't care whether the medical examiner came back with a homicide determination? It doesn't matter to you? And your answer, quote, no, because either way, Ms. Reed was going to be charged. Right?
Correct.
That's how you make a case cut and dry, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
In other words, Trooper Proctor, to hell with the medical evidence, Karen Reed was going to be charged because that's what you had decided to do, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
I want to change gears for a second and ask you about some electronic data, specifically as it pertains to Jennifer McCabe. You're aware that Jennifer McCabe deleted texts and calls from her phone before she turned it over to you?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that there were texts and calls missing from her phone before having that phone turned over to you?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you look at the extraction report, the Celebrite extraction report from her phone?
I have, yes.
And you didn't see the columns marked deleted, 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 deleted?
No, not that area, no.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Not that area.
Not that area, meaning?
No.
What does that mean? I don't know what you mean by not that area.
I went through the Celebrite report, but clearly I didn't review that tab.
So as you sit here, you're unaware of whether or not multiple texts and multiple phone calls were deleted from her phone that you have in your possession?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I'm not aware right now, sir.
As the case agent, as the case officer, do you believe it might be important to find out whether or not that phone appeared to have been manipulated or altered in some way before it was turned over? Wouldn't that be something that you would normally do?
That'd be important.
But you didn't do it with Jim McCabe's phone.
I didn't personally handle that, no.
Did you ever seize Nicole Albert's phone?
No.
Did you ever seize Brian Albert's phone?
No.
Colin Albert's?
No.
Chris Albert's?
No.
Julie Albert's?
No.
Were you concerned that if you seized any or all of their phones, especially Colin, Julie, and Chris, that there might be some indicators that you knew them on those phones?
No, that thought never crossed my mind.
But the fact remains, you never sought to seize any of those, did you?
No, I don't.
And you never asked, irrespective of what you saw in the Celebrite report, you never asked Jennifer McCabe whether or not that was a complete and accurate, I should say. Let me ask it a different way. Did you ever ask Jennifer McCabe whether or not she ever altered anything on her phone before turning it in?
I did not. Again, I didn't handle Miss McCabe's phone. I do the cell phone extraction on it.
I want to ask you about another issue concerning a potential conflict of interest. You were well aware that Canton PD was supposed to be, we talked about this at some length, conflicted off the case as of January 29th, 2022, right?
Correct.
And you even put it in that text message, not Cat, it's total opposite. They have to recuse themselves, BPD. Same with Canton, right?
Yes.
Those are your words on January 29th, right?
Yes.
And you knew that one of the reasons for Canton PD to recuse itself is because of the relationship between the Alberts and one of the detectives on Canton PD, Kevin Albert, right?
Correct.
You knew that Kevin Albert was the primary source of the conflict, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that he, above everybody else, should be completely removed from any contact with the investigation or the investigators, right?
Correct.
Yet when you wanted to coordinate witnesses for interviews in this case, who'd you turn to?
I texted Kevin Albert to see if he could secure a conference room for us to conduct interviews at the station.
The same Kevin Albert to help coordinate these witness interviews, who's the brother of Brian Albert, right?
Yes.
You could turn to tab 13, please. Your Honor, for the court's edification, it should be III,
All right, thank you.
then India.
Thank you.
Do you have that in front of you, Trooper Proctor?
Yes, I do.
If you'll turn to page 2591, with the court's permission, I'd like to publish.
Okay.
Can you see that on January 30th, 2022, at about 11:55 a.m., Kevin Albert texts you on your personal cell phone, Paul G. is reviewing the reports now. Steve Seraph is here if you need to interview him, and we can call Stephen Mullaney in as well, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
Who's Paul G?
Lieutenant Paul Gallagher.
So Kevin Albert, a Canton PD officer, and an Albert is texting you about Paul Gallagher, another Canton officer, about interviewing Steve Seraph, another Canton officer, and Steve Mullaney, a second Canton officer, correct?
Correct.
What investigation was Kevin Albert referring to in the text?
The death of John O'Keefe.
This investigation.
Correct.
Did you tell Kevin Albert it's completely inappropriate for him to be involved in this case at all?
I did not.
Did you tell him he shouldn't be having any contact with any of the witnesses? And he shouldn't even be having contact with you. Did you tell him that?
I did not.
What you did write back was, quote, okay, you and I are coming in at 1 to interview a firefighter, Katie, correct?
That's right.
So not only did you tell him that you were engaged in the process of obtaining interviews, you told him the name of the interviewee, right?
Yes.
And you were going to do it at Canton PD, correct?
Correct.
So you're sharing information about the identity of witnesses that you intend to interview with Brian Albert's brother, right?
Yes.
Then you asked Kevin Albert to actually contact the witnesses in order to schedule their interviews, didn't you?
Yeah, I believe it was Officer Mullaney and Seraph.
Turn to page 2592. Kevin Albert texts, okay, so I'll get Mullaney in as well. You interviewing her here? And you respond, yeah, if we can line them up for 1:30 and 2, that would be great, correct?
Yes.
So you were leaving it up to Kevin Albert to contact and coordinate with the witnesses that you intended to interview at Canton PD, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct.
You then answered anytime in the ballpark. Yes, you answered anytime in the ballpark, then you went on and said from 1:30 on, correct?
Yes.
Kevin Albert then says, okay, sounds good. And then he responds, if you want to interview witnesses in the recorded room here, you're more than welcome. You see that?
I do.
He was referring to an interview room or an interrogation room where there's surreptitious recording devices, correct?
Yes.
That's to help facilitate memorializing interviews that police officers want to take with any witness in a crime, right?
Correct.
That would mean that if you used a recorded room, those recordings would be in the hands of which agency?
That's why we did not use that recorded room.
But he offered, didn't he?
He offered. We did not use it.
Did you see that as a problem?
That he offered?
Yeah.
No, I don't, sir.
You see that as a problem because he might, I don't know, take some of those interviews and forward them to his brother?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Were you concerned that Kevin Albert was offering to utilize Canton's recording programs, facility, in order to get access to what the witnesses were saying so that he could then forward that or tell his brother?
No.
Never crossed your mind?
Never.
Well, if it never crossed your mind, why didn't you go ahead and use the recording room?
Typically don't record our interviews.
That's not what you said a second ago. You said the reason we didn't use the recording room was because of the obvious possibility that Kevin Albert and Canton PD could have access to the recordings.
Objection.
Sustained.
Didn't you say that's why we didn't use it?
No.
What was your answer, right?
No.
What did you say?
That we didn't use it. You.
When I said, if you made a recording, it would be in the hands of which agency? Obviously Canton PD. And your answer was, that's why we didn't use the recording room, right?
No, I don't recall saying that's why we didn't use the room.
You just said it. It's been 10 minutes. It's been 4 minutes.
No.
You don't remember that?
Not specifically stated like that.
All right, let me ask you a different way. If you weren't concerned that the interviews could be compromised by Canton PD and Kevin Albert, why didn't you just use the room? It was offered up.
Typically we don't record interviews. With a cooperating witness, we just sit down with them, take notes. If it's someone we deem necessary to actually have a recording of, then we'll pursue that option.
Trooper Proctor, after you knew that Canton Police Department was conflicted off the case, you continue to have a very close relationship with yet another Albert, Kevin Albert, correct?
We worked on a cold case together.
So you did have a close personal and professional relationship with Kevin Albert, didn't you?
I'd say it was a professional relationship.
Only a professional relationship?
Him and I were members at a gym together, and we worked a cold case together for several months.
Drinking, socializing, maybe?
Once in a while.
Right. So it would be beyond professional, right?
Yeah, acquaintances.
Drinking acquaintances, right?
On several occasions, yes.
Socializing acquaintances, right?
On several occasions.
So when you told the jury a few minutes ago that you were aware of and knew of but didn't have relationships with 3 Alberts, Julie, Chris, and Colin, not quite true, is it?
Objection.
Sustain.
There's a 4th Albert out there, isn't there? Yeah. Right?
Yes.
But you didn't tell us about that one,
Objection.
I'll allow it.
correct?
I don't consider that a relationship. It's
Well, let's look at that. 5 months into this investigation, in July of 2022, you were actually continuing to socialize with Kevin Albert, weren't you?
yes.
On July 19th, 2022, you and Kevin Albert went out drinking together, didn't you? Trooper Proctor, I'm not asking you to look for anything in the binder at this point. I'm asking for your memory.
I don't recall that.
You don't recall the date, or you don't recall,
July 19th, 2022.
you don't recall the drinking?
The date itself, sir.
Why don't we turn to tab 13?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a number or a letter? All
We're still in tab 13. Are we still in tab 13?
right, so what page, Mr. Jackson?
Page 2602. May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Trooper Proctor, are you on 2602?
I am.
The fact of that, does that refresh your recollection that on July 19th, 2022, you and Kevin Albert have been out drinking together?
It does.
In fact, the two of you got so drunk that Kevin Albert left his badge in your cruiser and couldn't find his gun the next morning, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
I can't speak to any level of intoxication, but I don't recall either of us being intoxicated.
Got it. So, isn't it true that at 7/20, July 20th, 2022, the day after, at 8:39 in the morning, you texted Kevin Albert, quote, "Found your badge in my cruiser this morning," end quote, correct?
Yes.
Then you texted him, "I can leave it in my locker at the gym, drop it off at your station, or leave it in my mailbox," correct?
Correct.
Kevin Albert responds, "My mailbox. Did I take my gun?" And then included a wince face emoji, correct?
Correct.
So the fact of the matter is, you two got so drunk that he couldn't find his badge and had to ask you the next morning where his gun was, right?
Again, I can't speak to any level of intoxication. Whether he just forgot it, I don't
I'm
know.
not asking you about his BAC, Trooper Proctor. I'm asking, have you seen drunk people before?
Yes.
You've been drunk before.
Yes, I have, sir.
We've all been drunk before, right?
Yes.
Was he drunk? Were you drunk that night?
I don't recall. It was a long time ago.
But he left his badge in your cruiser after a night of drinking. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Which means you were drinking and driving in your cruiser. Right?
From what I remember, we were down the Cape working on the cold case together and stopped for dinner, had a few beers, and then dropped him off.
The next morning, Kevin Albert also texted you at page 2606. Starting with, "It's bad." Tell me when you see that.
Okay, say it.
You know what I made it published?
Yes.
2606. Kevin Albert responded, "It's bad!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. "I was hungover for sure today!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. "Couple tonight to make me feel good." End quote. Correct?
Correct.
You can take that down. Does that refresh your recollection? The two of you had been out drinking the night before. He got so drunk that he couldn't find his badge, and he couldn't even find his gun.
Yes, it does refresh my memory.
Right. And you're in your cruiser. Right?
Yes, sir.
And this is with Brian Albert's brother, Trooper Proctor.
Correct.
I'm going to change gears, Trooper Proctor. You personally collected John O'Keefe's clothes from the hospital at Good Sam in Brockton, did you not?
I did.
I'd like to... At the time you were at Good Sam, you actually had the opportunity, you had the occasion to see Mr. O'Keefe in the hospital, correct?
Yes.
You also had the occasion to see his clothing in the hospital, correct?
Yes.
That's the clothing that you ultimately gathered, is that right?
Correct.
May I approach you on?
Yes.
If you could take a look at that. Tell me if you recognize it.
I do.
That photograph of you. I'm sorry, it's not of you, but do you see your legs in that photograph?
Yes,
Okay, and you also see the legs of Mr. O'Keefe on the hospital gurney, correct?
I do.
And you see a pile of clothes there?
Correct.
Do you want to have this marked and admitted?
Objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Exhibit 568.
568? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
We ready? May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Request the court's permission to publish.
Okay.
Do you see this? Do you see the photograph in front of you? Is that the same photograph that's been published up on the television screen?
Yes, sir.
Directing your attention to the leftmost portion of the photograph, do you see the clothes? First, the clothes on the ground.
I do, yes.
Okay, that appears to be what? What items or articles of clothing do you see?
The T-shirt, possibly the jeans.
Gray shirt as well.
Yes,
Okay, and those are your legs to the uppermost part of the screen, correct?
I believe.
In the blue pants.
Yes,
And do you see to the leftmost portion of the screen a chair?
I do.
You see what's on that chair?
My binder.
That's your portfolio.
It is.
Okay, that's something that you carry routinely as you're investigating during the course of your investigations.
Yes.
Do you keep your notes and things of that nature?
Yes.
Pens, paper.
Correct.
All right. Let me take that down. You indicated that you took possession of those clothing items from Good Samaritan Hospital, correct? Correct. You bagged them? Bagged? B-A-G-G-E-D? Bagged them?
Yes.
And then what did you do with them after that?
We secured them in Sergeant Mechanic's pickup truck.
And then what happened to them after they were secured in his pickup truck?
We traveled to Dighton to Mr. Reed's house.
Once you ultimately got back, I don't want to have to take you through the entire, everybody knows where you went. Sergeant Mechanic already testified. You get back to Canton at some point, correct?
Yes.
Ultimately, were the clothes transported into the your facility
Yes.
at the DA's office?
Correct.
Okay. What did you do with them after that?
We brought them to the evidence
I'm
processing.
going to ask you what you did, not what we did, what you did.
Sergeant Mechanic and I brought them to the evidence processing area, laid out butcher paper so the clothes could dry, put them on there in that area, and then I brought 2 cell phones to Trooper Garino so we could try to attempt to extract the phones.
What did you do with the clothing after it was dried out?
So the next day, Trooper DeChico arrived and brought them into the permanent evidence area where only him and another trooper in my office have access to. So they were secured from that at that point.
So you didn't book them into evidence?
I did not know.
When they're booked into evidence, there's supposed to be a log of that, correct?
I'm sorry?
There's supposed to be a log of that when they're booked into evidence, correct?
Yes.
You're the case officer on the case. One of your responsibilities is to make sure that chain of custody is maintained throughout the entirety of the investigation, all the way up to a courtroom, correct?
Yes.
Where's the log of those items being booked into evidence?
There was a chain of custody from when they entered the DA's office, and then when Trooper DeChico created a label for them, but also put them in a secure facility.
Can you show me where that is?
I'm not the evidence office. I don't have that.
I see. So you didn't bring a log with you of any sort concerning the chain of custody of these items, correct?
No.
As a matter of fact, the reason you didn't bring that chain of custody log is because none exists. Isn't that right?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Does a physical log exist starting from January 29th, 2022 to today?
Yes.
Where's that physical log, sir?
I'm not an evidence officer, so I don't know how that. Yeah. So I don't know how that's generated.
Right. So as a case officer, you have no idea where an evidence log is that has something as insignificant as, I don't know, the victim's clothing.
Objection.
Sustained.
The fact of the matter is, the evidence log attendant to this case regarding those clothing items starts on March 14th when they were taken to the crime lab, correct?
That's when the clothing was transported to the lab.
And that's the only log we have of what happened to those clothes between January 29th and today.
Objection.
Overruled. Do you know that?
I don't. I'm not off the top of my head, ma'am.
I want to talk for a second about the searches in Brian Albert's front lawn that took place on and after January 29th, 2022. As the case officer, Trooper Proctor, you also took control of the taillight pieces that were ultimately claimed to have been found at that location, correct?
Not in all searches.
Which of the pieces that were found were you responsible for taking control of?
8th, 11th, and 18th.
So who had control over the items that were found before the 8th? You said the 8th, 11th, and 18th, right?
Those are items that I had found on those days and that I had processed and essentially bagged and tagged them and handed them over to our evidence officer. There was multiple days that troopers were out there looking for more evidence.
So there would be a log of that too, right?
Again, how the system works as far as the evidence comes in, I can't speak to that.
So you have no idea what the chain of custody of any of these items are, the clothing or the taillight material, from January 29th until March 14th, when the evidence log starts. Is that what you're saying?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
There is a log. I mean, it's in our system where labels are created, and it generates the time and date that a label is created, and then it shows that it's at our office in a secure facility, and then it was brought to the lab on the 14th.
Well, what happens if the label is created and says something like, I don't know, February 4th? What happened to the items before February 4th?
They were stored in a secured facility, a secured room.
Says who? Where's the log?
Objection.
Sustain.
Is there a log of that?
Not to my knowledge.
You were responsible for seizing Miss Reed's car, correct?
Yes.
And you originally claimed that that seizure took place at 5:30 p.m. Is that right?
Correct.
You signed numerous affidavits under oath, claiming that you did not seize Miss Reed's vehicle until 5:30 p.m. on January 29, 2022, right?
Correct.
At the time that you seized Miss Reed's vehicle, you were unaware that there was alarm.com surveillance footage of the area from which the car was seized, correct?
Correct.
The fact of the matter is, that was false. The car was not seized at 5:30, was it?
4:16 p.m.
Right. An hour and change, an hour and 18 minutes, hour and 20 minutes earlier. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever seek to change or amend the error, the false statement about the time
So
the car was seized in any of those documents that you filed under oath?
when I incorrectly transcribed the times, it was on the first affidavit I'd written, and then as I continued to write other search warrants, I used that as a template. So I never caught it on the first one, and that's the reason those times are off on the other affidavits I'd wrote.
So the first one was false, and then every single one after that was false too.
There was just an incorrect transcription of time.
An incorrect transcription of the time. You
Yes.
call that, I don't know, a Scrivener's error?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Sure. Was it a typo?
Yes.
It was a typo. So you got the 4 wrong, you got the 1 wrong, and you got the 6 wrong. And those turned into 5 and 3 and 0, right?
They were typos, sir.
Okay. Fact of the matter is, you delivered that car to Canton PD to the Sallyport garage before a single piece of taillight material was ever found in this case, Trooper Proctor. Is that correct?
Correct. It arrives at 5:31.
And you also towed it to the Canton Police Department because that was conveniently close to the location at 34 Fairview, to the crime scene, right?
That was not my decision.
Whose decision was it?
I don't recall. I know that
Well, you're the case officer.
I would.
Who decides?
It was my decision. I did not make that call, sir.
So who are we pointing the finger at? Was it Sergeant Buchanan?
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr.
Sure.
Jackson.
Was it Sergeant Buchanan who made that decision to transport it to Canton?
It's a supervisor's decision. I don't know who it came from.
Was it Lieutenant Tully?
Again, I don't know who it came from.
So you were just following orders?
Yes.
You are aware that Massachusetts State Police, your agency, actually has not one, but 2 barracks, one in Middleborough, one in Foxborough, that are both closer as crow flies than the Canton PD Sallyport, from where the car was towed, correct?
Yes.
Both of those facilities were passed by, and the car was ultimately placed at Canton PD Sallyport at 5:31 or so, right?
Yes.
And you're aware that that Sallyport is about 3 minutes from 34 Fairview?
Yes.
And I'm just moving on.
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you were the lead case officer on this case. That means that you were required to collect and maintain all the videos that were pulled in connection with this investigation, correct?
Correct.
And you obviously are aware of your legal obligation to turn over any and all exculpatory information that you might come in possession of, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained.
You did pull a lot of video in connection with this case, did you not?
Yes.
About 290 videos from the Ring camera located in the driveway at One Meadows. Does that sound about right? I don't expect you to have counted every single one, but just under 300?
Correct.
A ton of them, right?
Yes.
Another 140 videos or so from the front door Ring camera of that same location, One Meadows, right?
Yes.
9 videos from the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Yes.
8 videos from the Temple Beth
Yes.
facility. 5 videos from CF McCarthy's.
Yes.
4 dash cam videos.
Correct.
2 videos from Canton Town Library.
Correct.
2 videos from Cassie's Corner Store, right?
Yes.
2 videos from the cars test on Miss Reed's vehicle, is that right?
Yes.
And 2 videos from the location at 34 Fairview where individuals were using leaf blowers.
Correct.
All of those, I did some rough math, 360 odd videos were handed over to the defense in or about June of 2022. Is that your understanding?
Objection.
That's sustained.
They were provided in discovery to the defense ultimately, right?
Okay. Yes.
Does it sound like, I don't expect you to have a date down pat, but spring of 2022, sound about right? Spring, early summer?
Yes.
All right. But there was additional video surveillance footage that you chose to hold back from that discovery, correct?
Objection.
Did you hold back videos?
I did not, Your Honor.
Okay, next question.
There's surveillance video from Canton Police Department's Sallyport garage that wasn't turned over, right?
That video was discovered later on and then handed over.
The first time you revealed the existence of that footage was in that separate proceeding in February of 2024. Isn't that right?
Yes.
You were questioned about it, and you knew you were under oath at the time, correct?
Correct.
And that's when you disclosed, yes, there is Sallyport footage, and I've seen it.
The video I was referencing was the exterior Sallyport camera where you can't make out anything.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. The exterior, you said. Exterior, outside.
Correct.
Meaning the one of the driveway.
Right.
And you say you can't make anything out in that.
There's two different ones. There's the main driveway camera, and then there's an exterior Sallyport camera.
You were asked about this set of videos at that other hearing, right?
Yes.
And you indicated at the time that there was one grainy video, which sort of mainly black and grainy,
Yes.
and another one that showed you and Sergeant Buchanan arriving at Canton PD behind Miss Reed's vehicle on the tow truck. Is that right?
Yes.
You were asked very specifically, are you aware whether there are any cameras in the garage in the Sallyport where Karen Reed's SUV was parked? And your answer was yes, right? In the garage.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked that question?
No.
I can repeat it if you wish.
Yeah, please.
Question, are you aware of whether there are any cameras in the garage or Sallyport where Karen Reed's SUV was parked? Answer, yes.
Okay.
And then you answered, have you reviewed the video footage of that garage? Answer, I saw one very grainy video, and then another of Sergeant Buchanan and I arriving in the main entrance around 5:30 following the vehicle. Period. You remember that answer?
Yes.
That clearly was an answer to the question, did you see video of the interior of the garage?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Were you answering a question about video inside the garage?
No, I was answering the question about what video I observed, and it was exterior video that I observed.
Although the answer to the question was cameras in the garage or Sallyport. That's the question.
If I was aware of any.
And your answer was yes. And then the next question is, have you reviewed the footage? And your answer was, I saw one very grainy video, and then another, Sergeant Buchanan and I arriving in the main entrance around 5:30 following the vehicle, right? That was your testimony.
Yeah, those two videos I'm referring to in the exterior of the building.
Question, when did you watch the video from the Sallyport? Answer, I haven't reviewed it, sir, in quite some time, so I can't recall what's on there. End quote. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So obviously at the time, in February of 2024, you had had that video surveillance, you had had that footage for so long that you couldn't remember exactly what was on it because it had been, quote, quite some time, right?
The exterior Sallyport camera.
Except you weren't asked about the exterior. You were asked, question, when did you watch the video from the Sallyport, right? That was the question.
Well, that was the video we had, so that was how I referenced it. There was the exterior Sallyport video.
Why didn't you say to the person that was questioning you under oath, I don't know anything about video inside the Sallyport. I'm referring to outside the building. Why didn't you say that and clarify it?
Yeah, I should have clarified it, sir.
Because you'll agree, it sounds a hell of a lot like, an awful lot like, you're talking about what's inside the Sallyport, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
The next question you were asked, why did you review the video of the Sallyport? Answer, we review every video we pull, and we pull a lot of video. End quote. Do you remember that?
I do.
Not one word in that testimony. Not one word says exterior, does it?
No, it does not.
You testified that you had obtained and reviewed the Sallyport garage video so long ago that you literally couldn't even remember what was on it, right?
Correct.
You did know, however, that if you had video at the Sallyport, it would clearly show that Miss Reed's vehicle arrived at 5:30, 5:31. Right? You knew that, correct?
Yes, from the driveway camera.
But you withheld that video out of 360 odd videos that you turned over. You withheld that one and never mentioned it until February of 2024, correct?
Objection.
Is that true?
I'm not aware of that, withholding that.
On April 4th, 2024, it's getting late. On April 4th, 2024, you turned over one video from the interior of the Sallyport garage, correct?
Yes, sir.
The interior, not the exterior, right?
Correct.
And that, remarkably enough, was a grainy video, right?
Yes.
And that video is missing the precise time that that vehicle was delivered to the Sallyport, correct?
Objection.
Was it? I'll allow it.
I don't recall.
It's missing 42 minutes at the beginning, and it jumps from 5:08 p.m. to 5:50 p.m., correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Have you reviewed the video?
Yes.
Did you see that the timestamp jumps from 5:08 to 5:50?
Objection.
Sustained.
You want a house?
I'll see you at sidebar if you want.
Okay, please. Ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you. You reviewed the video, the grainy video, correct?
Yes.
And that's from a camera perspective that would show, or that does show, the right rear area of the SUV after it's pulled in, correct?
Yes.
Did you note that the time jumps from 5:08 to about 5:50 at the beginning of the video?
Yeah, I observed a jump in video.
And that was about 42 minutes, correct?
Approximately, yes.
You're aware that there's another video from the interior of that Sally port as well, correct?
Yes.
And you're also aware that by the way, did you secure that video, the second one? Let me ask you a predicate question, because it's a little confusing. The second video from the interior of the Sally port is inverted, correct?
Yes.
You're now aware of that.
I am.
Did you recover that video?
I did not.
Who did?
I believe Detective Lieutenant Tully received that from the Canton Police Chief.
Rafferty?
I believe so.
Who asked for it?
I'm not sure, sir.
Did you make the request?
I did not.
How did you become aware that a request had been made?
I was made aware that the video had essentially existed from the interior Sally Port area.
By whom?
I was probably informed by Detective Lieutenant Tully.
So Lieutenant Tully tells you that a second video exists, correct?
Interior Sally Port cameras, yes.
When did he tell you that?
I don't recall.
Was it weeks ago or years ago?
That was more recent than, maybe months ago, a month ago.
Matter of fact, it was after the trial had already started. Mid-April, correct?
I don't recall. I thought it was before.
If it was before, was it weeks before, days before?
I don't recall.
I'm just trying to pin down, are we talking about 6 months ago or are we talking about 6 weeks ago?
It wasn't 6 months ago.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, you were told about the second video from Lieutenant Tully, right?
Yes.
Did he tell you he had already seen it?
I'm sure he watched it.
Did he tell you he needed you to go get it?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
No.
Okay, so when was the first time you saw it?
A few weeks ago? A month ago?
What were the circumstances in which you saw that video?
Just reviewing the video
Where?
at my desk.
So you pulled it, pardon me, you had access to the video. It
Yes.
was on your system somehow.
It was on thumb drives and a disc.
You put that in your computer and just decided on your own to watch it, correct?
Yes.
And what did you notice?
One of the SUV being brought into the garage.
You're in the video, right? That's you toward the back of the truck.
Yep, I'm in the video. Some Canton PD members there as well. Tow truck guy drops the vehicle off. He's in the front driver's seat. Exits. Sergeant Mechanic's there. I believe Chief Berkowitz, the retired police chief.
Where was he?
He was kind of like mulling around the area. I feel like he was towards like the back open garage gate there.
The back.
Towards like the rear. Yeah.
Where you were.
Yes.
Was he the person, did you note that there were certain individuals that just seemed to apparate out of nowhere, just appeared?
Yes, there was one individual in like the top left corner of the video pushing a broom that kind of just appeared.
And also toward the back of the vehicle, somebody just, while you were at the back of the vehicle, just sort of appeared and walked out of the Sally Port, correct?
Yes.
And was that Chief Berkowitz?
Yeah, it looks like him, yes.
Okay. So you and Chief Berkowitz are both toward the rear of the vehicle. He just apparates out of thin air because the video is missing some footage, correct?
It appears that way.
And you're
Or
holding
it skips.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Or it skips. I don't know that system at all, so.
Okay. And you're holding what appears to be that same black portfolio that we saw in the hospital.
Yes.
So, anything else you noticed that was odd about the video? Other than the time skips?
So the timestamp on the bottom was inverse? Was it reversed?
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, the timestamp on the bottom of it was it was backwards.
Was it blue?
So instead of reading left to right, it was right to left.
Understand.
Okay.
Was it blue?
I believe it was yellow.
Just moving on.
Yes.
So the video you saw had a timestamp that was inverted, correct?
Yes.
How about the video itself? Is that inverted?
No, from the video I saw, the way the vehicle was brought in relation to the garage and the doors into the PD, it wasn't reversed or inverted.
It was or was not?
It was not.
So as you saw the video, the portion of the vehicle that purported to be the passenger side was in fact the passenger side, and the vehicle, the side of the vehicle that purported to be the driver's side was in fact the driver's side.
Yes, so I reviewed video yesterday just to rewatch it, and the one that I watched had the correct angle, it wasn't reversed. The car was brought in, tow truck driver gets out. From the driver's side, it wasn't reversed. The only thing reversed on it was like the timestamp on the bottom.
Well, were you watching video that was produced in this trial?
Yes.
So were you aware that the defense presented a piece of evidence?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Were you aware that the defense presented a piece of evidence where we inverted the video back to the correct
No, it's not.
And that timestamp was inverted?
I was not aware of that.
When did you watch that, that video?
Just the other day, I was reviewing it.
Okay. Mr. Jackson, we'll take our luncheon break.
Okay, thank you.